Okay, today is adding and subtracting expressions. So that is our topic, adding and subtracting expressions. And the date is 10/16/19. So you know exactly what day we took these notes, and we may be able to even go back and find them if they get lost at some point. And it helps put them in order. So, adding expressions. I kind of want to maybe break this down a little bit more to where we are just going to focus on each individual term, what's in the term, and whether it's positive or negative. And that kind of tells you how to combine terms. I'd stop thinking about adding and subtracting and just think about combining. So, expressions can be added by simply combining like terms. Okay. Be sure your answers are written so the term with the variable is the first term in the expression. Some of you are catching on to this. Some of you are still putting the variable term last. It's not a big, huge deal. But you need to start learning to put the variable terms first, and there's a way that you can make sure you do that. So I'm going to go over these examples. I'm going to do the evens. You are going to do the odds. So let's look at number 2. Now we have, in parentheses, negative 8x plus 5. Then we have a plus sign, and then we have, in another set of parentheses, 5x minus 1. We need to get rid of those parentheses. So again, using, we'll call it GEMDAS grouping, we can't do anything inside the parentheses. There are no exponents. So now we just have to worry about multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, and most of the time we're just doing multiplication and dividing, usually distribution and things like that separate. But I kind of want to get away from the terms of adding and subtracting and just combining. So let's look at this expression itself. Okay, there's nothing I can do in those parentheses. So basically, and I have a plus sign right here. This is important. So let's look at the first part of the parenthesis, the first part of the expression inside the parentheses. It's negative 8x plus 5. There's nothing I can do inside, so I just have negative 8x plus 5. I can get rid of the parentheses. I have this plus sign. That plus sign means I just add what's in the parentheses. And again, I don't like using that word, but let's make sure everything has a sign and a number also as we go along. So we're going to combine. That just means combine. Okay, let's get away from adding and subtracting if we can and combine. We're going to combine that with a positive 5x and a negative 1. Okay, all I did was I got rid of the parentheses basically, and I put a sign in front of that 5x. Okay, there doesn't need to be 2 plus signs in there. Plus doesn't do anything. Doesn't change anything. So I just got rid of one of the pluses. So it's negative 8x plus positive 5, positive 5x, negative 1. Let's think of it like that. Let's underline our terms. So we have a negative 8x. I underlined the sign with it, the sign in front of it. The positive 5, positive 5x, negative 1. Now let's rearrange them so all of our variable terms with letters, are first. The negative 8x can stay where it is because it's already in the front. The positive 5x, I'm going to move that. Positive 5 is going to move, and the negative 1 stays at the end. I just left it at the end. So now all of our variable terms are together, and our constant terms are together. The terms with the same variable, the same letter, can be combined. Okay, let's get rid of that adding and subtracting in our heads. They can be combined. So we have a negative 8 and a positive 5. Let's forget about the x for a second. We're just going to combine those. Negative 8 plus 5. If you think about that on a number line, we're at negative 8. We move to the right 5. That still puts us at negative 3. Okay, the x comes along. It's still, that x is still with them. So I've combined those two terms. Now it has a positive 5 and a negative 1. If I combine those, positive 5, and then if I go combine it with a negative 1, that means I got to go left on the number line 1, which leaves me at a positive 4. And that is the answer. I'm done. I can't do anything else with it. And I have my variable. At this stage, our variables should not disappear, okay, unless there's something in the problem where they actually add like a positive 6 and an x and a negative 6x. That's the only time they're going to disappear, because then you'd have 0x, and there's no reason to write that. But unless that happens, you should always have a variable in these problems, okay? They don't disappear. Let's look at the next one. Everything inside the first set of parentheses has a number and a sign, so I'm going to rewrite it, -1, positive 4a. And I'm going to combine that with an a plus 6. Well, that a doesn't have a sign or a number. So if it doesn't have a sign, that means it's positive. If it doesn't have a number, it's a 1. So 1a plus 6. Now let's underline all of our terms. Every term should have a number and a sign now. -1. Some terms will have a variable, positive 4a, positive 1a, positive 6. Let's move our variable terms out front. Positive 4a goes in the front. Positive 1a goes next to it. The negative 1a, or -1, I'm going to move to the end, and the positive 6 is going to stay at the end. So now all I did was rearrange my terms. You can do that as long as you're taking the sign of the term with it. So now we have like terms next to each other that we can combine. The a terms we can combine. Positive 4 and positive 1, we get a positive 5a. Negative 1 and positive 6, that's the same as positive 6 minus 1. So that is a positive 5. That is our answer. We don't have to have that positive out front in front of the 5a, but it's not wrong if it's there. Okay, you could have wrote this either way, like positive 5a or 5a plus 5. Either one is right. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to put a box around this. So if you're comfortable with that positive 5a, that's fine. But this is a little bit more technically correct. You don't have a sign on the first term if it's positive. Let's look at number 6. Again, if there's a positive right here, I can just basically get rid of the parentheses. So I have a negative 6y, a positive 12, and I'm combining that with a 5. Well, that is a positive 5, so let's put a positive 5 and then a negative 8y. Let's underline our terms. This is how I want to see all your work done. Underline the terms. I don't want to just see things combined. Okay, if the terms aren't underlined and rearranged, then I won't accept it as homework. So let's put our terms, our like terms together. So, and we always want our variable terms first. So I look for the terms with letters in them. A negative 6y is the first thing I come across. Okay, that goes out front. Then a negative 8y. Okay, so I'm done with the y terms. Then we have the positive 12 and the positive 5. Now we have all of our like terms together, and we can start combining. A negative 6 and a negative 8. They have the same sign, so using our integer rules, if the signs are the same, add and keep the sign. So 8 and 6 is 14, and I keep the negative, so that's negative 14y. Again, integer rules, if the signs are the same, positive 12 and positive 5, add and keep the sign. 12 and 5 is 17, and it's a positive 17. And that's my answer. Done. There's nothing else I can combine. There shouldn't be more than one of the same letter in your answer. If there was 2 y's left in here somewhere, there's another term with a y, then I'm not done. Okay? All your like terms need to be combined. Let's look at number 8. Again, we have that positive, so we're good. So we get rid of the parentheses in the first part, negative p. Oops, I kind of made a mistake. What am I missing in there? I'm missing a number. Negative 1p. Let's go ahead and write a negative 1p, positive 8, combining that with a 6. That's 6. There's no sign, so it's a positive 6 and a positive 4p. Okay? Now let's underline our terms. Negative 1p, positive 8, positive 6, positive 4p. We're going to put our like terms together. Now I'm going to do something that you might think is a little bit off. Instead of putting that negative 1p first, I want to put that positive 4p first. It's not a big deal. You can do that. As long as you have the sign with the term, it can be moved. I'm doing it kind of for a reason, and I'll show you here in a second. So all I did was I moved that 4p out front. That's all I did. Everything else stayed where it was. Not a big deal. The reason why I did that now is a 4 minus a 1 looks a little bit more like something you're used to. 4 minus 1. Hopefully every one of you came up with 3. Now, another thing I want to go over, integer rules. This goes back to basically the first week of school. When you're combining integers, if the signs are different, that's a positive 4 and a negative 1, so my signs are different. You subtract the two numbers, 4 minus 1 is 3, and keep the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. That means the sign of the number that is farther from 0. Well, what's farther from 0? Positive 4 or negative 1? Obviously, positive 4 is 4 units away from 0. Negative 1 is 1 unit away from 0. So I keep the sign of the 4. So 4 minus 1 is 3. I keep the sign of the 4, so that is a positive 3p. Okay, so I've combined my like terms. 8 plus 6, that's an easy one, 14. See, or you could write it as just 3p plus 14. Either one of those is fine, although the one on the right is a little more technically correct. Let us go to subtracting expressions. This is where you got to pay attention. I will tell you, I had trouble with this in math until I realized it's really a lot simpler than I thought. Expressions can also be subtracted by simply combining like terms. But there's a catch. Be sure to distribute, this is the catch, the negative first. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to look at number 10 first. Hopefully you got that. Expressions can also be subtracted by simply combining like terms, just what we did before, but you have to distribute the negative first. So let's look at number 10. Nothing I can do in the parentheses, so I'm just going to write that. But I do need a sign. I got a positive 5x. Let's write positive 5x minus 7. So I have my two terms. Now I have this negative. There's two ways you can think about this, but the simplest way is to think that negative right there just changes the sign of everything inside. Changes signs, okay, of everything inside the parentheses. So that negative 2x, that negative makes that negative 2x a positive 2x. That negative makes that negative 6 a positive 6. Is that hard? Is that difficult? Hopefully not. You can also think of it as a negative 1 times a negative 2. What does that give me? Positive 2x. Negative 1 times negative 6, positive 6. Same thing. But I like to think of it as that negative just takes everything inside the parentheses and changes the sign. That's really the simplest way to think about it. So now I'm left with my 4 terms here. I'm going to underline all my terms, the positive 5x, positive 2x, negative 7, positive 6. Let's put them together. So I've got those two terms out front. Then I've got the negative 7 and the positive 6. Now we just combine like terms. 5x plus 2x, 5 plus 2. 7x. Negative 7 plus 6. That might be kind of difficult for you, but think about it. We're combining a negative and a positive. Here's another way to do this. I'm going to make 7 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? There's 7 negatives. I'm going to combine that with 6 positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Every positive cancels a negative. So those cancel, 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 cancel. What am I left with? 1 negative, or a negative 1. Okay, that's another way to think about it. Or you can say, okay, I'm at negative 7 on a number line. I have to add 6, so I go to the right 6. Where do I end up on the number line? At negative 1. Same thing. Okay, so that's number 10. So let's do a couple more. Again, I can't do anything with what's inside these parentheses right here. So I'm just going to rewrite them. Negative 6x minus 9. This negative means I'm going to change the sign of everything. Well, this was a positive 10, right? There's no sign there. So that's going to become a negative 10. And that negative, and let's look at that negative x. That's a negative 1x, right? That negative is going to change that into a positive 1x. Okay, it's all it does. That negative in the middle is going to change the signs. So now let's move our stuff around so that our like terms are together. First, we need to underline our entire term. Negative 6x, negative 9, negative 10, positive 1x. And let's put them together. So we got a negative 6x, a positive 1x, negative 9, negative 10. So now we just need to combine like terms. A negative 6 and a positive 1. Again, there's multiple ways you can do this. I could do it this way again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are all negatives. 6 negatives. That's a negative 6. And 1 positive. Well, every negative cancels out a positive and vice versa. Every positive cancels out a negative. What am I left with? 5 negatives. Negative 5x. Okay? I got negative 9. And I'm combining that with a negative 10. Let's do that. I'm going to do it the long way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's all 9 negatives. I need to combine that with 10 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, none of those cancel. Negatives don't cancel negatives. Now how many negatives do I have? I have 19 negatives. That's what I have. Negative 19. It's another way to look at that. Now that negative out front in front of the 5x needs to be there. Okay, if the sign is negative, it has to be there. The only time it doesn't have to be there is if it's positive and it's the first term in the expression. Okay, or the first term within parentheses. Let's look at 14. Can't do anything inside the parentheses, but I do need to put a sign. That's a positive 8 because there's nothing there, so it's positive. So I have a positive 8x, negative 2y. Now, again, I'm going to put a positive right here because that doesn't have a sign with it. So that negative is going to change that sign to a negative 6x. This negative is going to change that sign to a positive 16y. The negatives are the only ones that change signs. The positives, you don't have to do this. Okay, if that was a positive, like in the first part of the notes, you wouldn't have to do this. So now let's underline. We've got some interesting stuff going on here. I've got a positive 8x, negative 2y, negative 6x, positive 16y. Let's move the terms that are like together, so the x terms need to go together. I'm going to put the x, and you also want to go alphabetically. So x comes before y, so I want to put my x terms first. I got a positive 8x and negative 6x, so I move those out front. Next I have the negative 2y and the positive 16y. I could have put those in a different order and it might have looked a little bit better for you, but let's just work on it this way. Actually, let's move some stuff. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it because you might have already wrote this down. So let's go down here. We've got 8x minus 6x. So that 8 minus 6 is 2x. Negative 2 plus 16. Reverse it. What's 16 minus 2? You can do that. Just think of it in the opposite. If it might make things easier. 16 minus 2, that's a positive 14, and the y comes along. Okay? I still have two variables, but they're different. I can't combine an x term and a y term. They have to stay separate. So I'm done here. Okay? Next one. Let's look at 16. We've got negative 6a and a negative b. Well, if that negative b doesn't have a number, let's put a number in there. So now we have a negative 6a and a negative 1b. We have this negative. That means we change the sign of everything. So that 8b in there, that's a positive. So that negative changes that positive to a negative 8b. Then the negative changes that negative to a positive 4. Then we underline all of our terms with the sign in front of it. Then we're going to put them alphabetically. So negative 6a, do you see any more a terms? I don't. So the negative 6a stays out front. We're not going to have to worry about it because there's nothing to combine it with. Luckily, all this stuff's already in order. The b terms are already together. Now all we've got to do is combine the b terms. The negative 6a stays by itself. I don't combine it with something that doesn't have an a in it. Negative 1b and negative 8b. If I got one negative and then I add 8 more negatives to it or combine it with 8 more negatives, now I've got 9 negatives. 9 negative b's plus 4. I can have 3 terms left over. That's fine. As long as you don't have matching terms. I've got one constant term. That's the positive 4. I shouldn't have more than one. I have one b term. I shouldn't have more than one b term at the end. I have one a term. I shouldn't have more than one a term at the end. Okay? As long as I only have one type of each term, I'm done. Let's move to 18. 18, again, let's put a sign on here. Positive 4m. Let's put a positive here on the 3n, and then let's rewrite everything. So I got a positive 4m, a negative 7n. That negative is going to change the sign of that, so it's a negative 3n. And that negative is going to change the sign of that, so it's going to become a positive 2m. Now, let's underline our terms. Positive 4m, negative 7n, negative 3n, positive 2m. Let's put our m terms first, because that comes alphabetically before n. So we put the positive 4m can stay there. The positive 2m is going to move. The negative 7n will come next, and then the negative 3n at the end. Now we can combine a positive 4 and a positive 2. That gives me a positive 6m. A negative 7 and a negative 3, that's a bunch of negatives, so that gives me a negative 10n. I'm done. Okay? That's it. That's all I got to do. So, 20. So the last one I'm going to do, and then I want you guys to try the odds on the bottom. And actually, I want you to do all the odds on this on your own. So, again, I'm going to go through this and look. Does everything have a sign? No. This does not have a sign, so I'm going to put a sign on it. Does everything have a number? No. This is missing a number. So now everything's got a sign and a number. The first set of parentheses, nothing I can do in there. Done with the first set of parentheses. The negative, going to change. So negative is going to change that positive to a negative 5y. That negative is going to change that positive to a negative 10. I'm going to underline my terms and put the like terms together. Luckily, they're already together. The x term is first alphabetically. The y terms are second alphabetically. And then the constant is at the end. So we're good there. Now I'm just going to combine stuff. How many x terms do you see? I only see one. I can't combine it with anything else. So the negative 3x doesn't do anything. It just comes down. Now I've got a negative 1y and a negative 5y. Negative 1 and negative 5. You've got one negative and 5 more negatives. Now you have 6 negatives. That negative 10, do you see any more terms without a variable in it? Nope, just the negative 10. That's it. That's the answer. Okay? So do all the odds. When you're done with the odds on here, go ahead and do all the odds on the homework. Okay? That's all the odds. All of them. Even on the examples, okay? You don't have to do this if you don't want, but sometimes it helps. Sometimes it gives you that mindset where you start understanding what combining integers is all about. It's up to you, but everything else needs to be done. I do want to see things like this where you write all the terms, underline, and then group them, and then combine them, okay? Don't give me homework without that done, okay? But you are responsible for all the odds on the notes and all the odds on the homework.